When I showed up as a CEO, I was there 3 days and the bank cut off all credit to the company. I had thousands of employees and I had no money. We owed the bank $65 million. People don't like to be told what to do. So I said, you're right. What do I know? I've only been here 3 days. In 45 days, I paid off $65 million in bank debt. I had no bank debt left at all. One of the greatest things I did is I would incent people to come forward with operating efficiency ideas. Most people fail because they either are scared to do it or they run into some obstacles and they go like, oh, I'm never going to succeed.
There are people who walk into a room and own it, not with words, but with presence. Hugh Hilton is one of them. He doesn't chase headlines, but behind closed doors, billion-dollar decisions are shaped by the minds that truly move business forward. Private equity, distressed assets, mergers and acquisitions, boardroom battles. This is where Hugh excels. He's a global turnaround strategist, known for transforming some of the world's most challenged companies and building sustainable structures in their place. A lawyer with an MBA and over $8 billion in deal experience and co-author of the international best-selling book, Business is War, Hugh has advised Fortune 500s and rebuilt companies from the ground up. But what drives someone like that? What does it take to turn failing empires into winning legacies? In this conversation, we go deep into strategy, to mindset, and the unspoken rules of high-stakes business. This is Ellen's Conversation with Hugh Hilton.
Thank you again for being here. I appreciate. As long as I talk with business owners and entrepreneurs, I've seen often that business start bleeding even before you look at the numbers or numbers shows it. You're internationally recognized for your turnaround work and true expert in seeing others really miss in business. Let's ask, if you think back in business that you turn around, like Casino, Chichi, and a lot of restaurants that you did, and so many business, what is the one that you had challenged the most, and why was it was the difficult, and how you conquer?
Okay. Well, the biggest challenge that I ran into was a company that was a mass merchant, had a $1.2 billion of revenue. And when I showed up as a CEO, I was there 3 days and the bank cut off all credit to the company. So I had, thousands of employees and I had no money. So they were already having problems. So they brought me in to fix the problems, but then I had no money and I was going to run out of money within 30 days and then the company would get liquidated.
And a lot of pressure, just imagine.
Oh, it's a huge amount of pressure. And so imagine, so I'm thinking now, how do I fix the company when I have no money? They've got a lot of things to fix. So that's when I believe in what I call divine intervention. Okay. So, and the most perfect example of that is when I got the phone call. I was actually at one of our stores with my head of store operations, the store manager, my chief merchant. And I get this call that the bank's cut off all credit to the company. And we owed the bank $65 million. So I'm kind of in a state of shock. So this person, we're watching somebody check out at the front of the store and they're going through the checkout process, and this bottle of water goes through the scanner and rolls down the little slope that you put in a bag. And I said, see that bottle of water? And they said, yeah. And I said, how long does it take you to get that back in the store? And that's where why out of all these things would all of a sudden I ask that question, and I think that's primarily because I'm curious.
Curiosity, you always do that. Right?
Yeah, but what happened was completely unplanned by me, and they said, well, it goes to our 1.5 million square foot distribution center, and it sits in a queue for 10 days. And day 11, it's picked and it's back in the store on day 12. I said, really? And I said, and how do you pay for that? And they said, well, we pay cash on delivery. I said, oh, I said, how about this? How about, because I said, well, they're taking 10 days to do that. I said, why should it take 10 days? You know, we should be able to
Why?
send that, you know, have it electronically communicated to our distribution center at the end of business that, hey, we sold all these things and we want them replenished in the store the next morning. So I said to him, I said, how about this? How about we sell that bottle of water and we get it back in the store the next day? And they said, can't be done. Nobody does it like that. It's impossible.
Nobody does. Yeah,
Yeah,
typical answer.
typical, you know, right,
Mindset.
left brain mindset. Yeah, you know, we don't
Exactly.
want to do anything different. So I said, well, you're kind of doing it now. You're just waiting 10 days to do it. No, 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 no. You don't know anything. You've only
We
been
don't understand.
yeah, so one of the big things I've learned in fixing all these companies is the, you know, the 6 C's. The first C is that people don't like to be told what to do. So I use choice, which then I turned around to them and I said, okay, well, you're right. I just started arguing, you're right. What do I know? I've only been here 3 days. You're absolutely right. I said, but here's one thing I do know. And they kind of look at me like, what is that? And I said, well, we can continue doing it the way you're doing it. And in 30 days, none of us will have a job because the bank called today and they said they cut off all credit to the company. Or we can do this thing that you say can't be done, but if somehow we figure out how to do it, we'll all have a job. So you know what? You choose. You let me know what you'd like to do. I'll do whatever you want to do. And they go like, well, you know, if you put it that way, I guess we could try to do it. I said, no, no, no. You know what? If you want to just continue doing it the way you're doing it and none of us have a job, fine, we'll do that. Because I knew that that wasn't going to be a great outcome for them. So they said, okay, fine, we'll do that. And then I said, and how do you pay for the water? And they said COD. And I said, great, well, we're going to change that to 210 net 30, which means if I pay it at purchase, I get a 2% discount, but I have up to 30 days to pay. So they said, okay, we'll do that. In
We'll do that.
in 45 days, I paid off $65 million in bank debt. I had no bank debt left at all. So now I
Wow.
saved the company and now I had the opportunity to actually fix the company because I had the cash to be able to do it. But that was probably the scariest one when I heard,
Exactly.
you know, like, how am I going to do this? I have no money. And then all of a sudden, as I said, literally
Out of
nowhere.
nothing.
Yeah, it was just divine intervention. And then
Yeah,
I
amazing.
worked through and did the same thing and started looking at every line of business because what was fascinating about this company, it was the actual predecessor to, have you ever heard of the company Walmart?
Yeah.
Yeah, so actually the owner of Walmart came down from Bentonville, Arkansas, Sam Walton, and looked at this company that sold everything you can imagine in one store. He said, wow, that's amazing. I'm gonna go back to Bentonville and do the same thing. And that's how Walmart started. So, you know, we had a grocery store, we had, you know, pharmacy, we had, you know, furniture store, we had everything. We sold everything. And so it was a great concept and it did really well until they really didn't understand profit margins and this, that, and the other thing. And that's when they got in trouble and they brought me in as the CEO.
Again.
Yeah. So
Wow.
I fixed the company and then turned it back to them. And you'll love this story. So when I got there, they were selling apparel. So I was curious. I thought, well, how much of this we're selling? I don't really think this is what the customers coming to the store to buy is clothing. I think they'll go to Macy's or somebody else, another store for clothing. I don't really think that's who our customers. They come here for groceries and for hardware and for other things like that, and not really clothing. Because when I looked at the performance on clothing, we didn't do that well. I mean, we didn't sell a lot of it and we had a hard time selling it without having a bigger discount. So I really restricted the growth of that product line inside the company. So after I fixed the company, I gave it back to them and they brought in a new CEO. And that CEO came out of a company called Montgomery Wards. And then he made a big bet on apparel, like we're going to double the size of apparel. Didn't work. So it was a failure. Then he, instead of pivoting and saying,
Fix
that's
it.
not going to work, he doubled down on it and it bankrupted the company, you know, like 2 years after I fixed it. So
Wow, that's amazing story and that
yeah,
experience. A lot of things that now I really look forward to question about it. One
yeah.
of them, you talk about CEO. When you want to hire CEO, or if you want to create a high performer team,
Mhm.
what exactly you look for and how you create that, because as you mentioned, they can ruin everything that you create.
Well, yeah, it's fascinating because when I got the way I got that job, which was fascinating, is I'm part of this global restructuring firm, and one of the principals was contacted to make a pitch to Fedco was the name of the company, and um, so I was going to do the day-to-day operations, and he was, I was going to be the chief operating officer, and he was going to be the CEO. And so we were supposed to go make a pitch to the company, like, here's how we can fix your company. So he just never showed up.
Mm,
So eventually, the CFO came in and said, "Hey, I don't understand what you guys are doing here. I don't see anything happening, this, that, and the other thing." So at that point in my career, I had never been the company as CEO of a billion-dollar plus revenue company. So, but I didn't, since I thought my founding partner wasn't apparently showing up to make the pitch, I went back to my office and I said, I'm going to have to make the pitch. So what I looked at is all their different operating divisions, and I came up with a strategy to increase the sales and profitability of the different divisions. And I put it all in a presentation, and then I made a presentation to the chairman, and
mm,
then I'll never forget this day. He came in and he took the presentation, he threw it on the table, and he
wow.
would like this started pointing. This presentation, I thought he was going to say, because I'd never run a billion-dollar revenue company before. I thought he was going to say, this presentation's just junk, blah, 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 blah. So I was thinking about what I needed to say afterwards, and try to
Exactly.
explain all the issue. So it's like time slowed down when you're in a situation like that, when he's going, this company, this presentation, all of a sudden he goes, this presentation is brilliant. I want to hire you as the CEO. And all of a sudden I had to go, like, I had to change to being very kind of, perplexed. Oh yes, of course. Yes, this is fantastic. I'd be happy to. So I had to kind of shift from just sheer panic to very
Yeah,
nonplussed. Uh,
shifting.
exactly. So that's
Mm,
it. And then I think what one, I've had more of the operations where I'm either the CEO or the chief restructuring officer. So for me, what I do the first thing is I ask for an org chart. I obviously ask for job descriptions.
yeah,
Then
yeah.
I obviously really focus
Or
on,
SOP.
yeah, I look at the balance sheet and the P&L, and then I call in the various officers of the company, and I ask them some questions, and then I evaluate their operational expertise along with their personality. So, because I, as a CEO, can do all the right things, but if there's somebody below me that's going to try to sabotage what I'm trying to
Mm,
do, then that's going to
exactly.
ruin the outcome. So I need to remove them from the company.
Mm,
So it's really important for me, and two things, which is I understand what else and what everybody's opinion is. And then I look at the company and I bring into play the fifth C, which is compassion. So what I find in most troubled companies is that people don't ask opinions of people that are closer to the customer or to
mm,
the actual operations. They think they're smarter than everybody, so they just tell people what to do. And
exactly.
there's a lot of people that know things aren't being done well, but nobody asks their opinion, so they don't voice their opinion. And
That's true.
one of the greatest things I did is when I ran some of these big casinos, they were like multiple million square foot operations. So I couldn't be everywhere in 2 million square feet trying to figure out what's running well and what's not. So what I would do is I would incent people to come forward with operating efficiency ideas. And so I said, here's what I'll do. You bring whatever you want to bring to me, as long as it isn't like, I think you should fire everybody in my department. And to the extent that you're able to come up with great ways to increase efficiency, I'll give you 20% of the first year's cost savings. And they said, well, what happens if I come up with something that I'm able to save, $200,000 a year? And I said, well, I'm going to give you 20% of that in the first year. So they go, really? And it was amazing how many people came up with great ideas that it would have taken me months or years to get to because of the magnitude of the company. So I think, and then even with the Chi-Chi's restaurant situation, I asked questions and I found out that the corporate headquarters was in California. All the restaurants were in the Midwest, and they never asked for feedback from the regional managers. They just told them what to do. So when I got there, and obviously created problems for them, when I got there, I invited all the regional managers back into corporate, and we all got in a room, went over the menu and the items and the customer issues, and they were all kind of uncomfortable. And I said, guys, you seem like so uncomfortable. And they said, yeah, because nobody from corporate ever asked our advice on anything. They just told us what to do. So
know how to talk.
yeah, so, and as soon as I did that, then they felt engaged, operations improved, sales went up, and because people want to feel like they're part of something. So,
Something, yeah.
yeah, so
Exactly. That's why I always think emotional intelligence is really important in business. All example, our valuable experience that you share, self-awareness and emotion intelligence really is highlighted.
absolutely, it's critical, it's essential, it's as important
Essential.
as
Yeah.
anything in the company.
Yeah.
And
You did a lot of M&A for sure, a lot of M&A deals, and also in all deals that you was part of, negotiation is a major one. I
mhm,
know that even in a time you decided to be a lawyer.
mhm.
How do you use a strategy in a negotiation that if you face in a hard one?
It's fascinating because you're right. I went to law school because I wanted to focus on real estate law.
Mm,
And what was fascinating is it actually came up to into play in business, because one of the things in law school I did is I was there. I said, when I get to law school, I'm gonna really study to really immerse myself in the law. In business school, going through business school, it was all about getting grades so I could get to the next level of business school from undergrad to grad school. And then when I went to law school, I went to law school because I realized in real estate, a lot of real estate aspects are legal, and I didn't know the legal issues. So when I was in a negotiation, I didn't understand what the issue was, so I couldn't figure out if my attorney was giving me good advice or not. So that's what I
exactly.
went to law school, and one of the fascinating things is I developed a way to take exams, and it was very successful because the first semester I took my blue book exams, and I got my test back, and I wrote like 3.5 pages and I got 0 points. So I said, that's not efficient. So I developed a strategy of how to be very efficient. Then my grades went up, and then I said, okay, well, I'm going to really stress test this. I'm going to sign up for a class, never go to class, and see if I can pass. And I said, what's one thing I'm never going to interact with or have any activity in? And I said, oh, this debtors creditors course, this bankruptcy course. I said, oh, I'm never going to have a bankrupt real estate development. I said, so I'll just take that because it doesn't matter. So I don't care if I don't learn anything. So it was fast. So I never went to class, showed up for the final exam, and the professor goes, who are you? I go, I'm Hugh Hilton. He goes, I've never seen you in this class. Yeah, and I said, well, it's big, it's dark. He goes, it's not that big and it's not that dark. I've never seen you. I said, well, I'm sure I'll just flunk the exam then. I just grabbed the exam and walked away. Well, long story short, I used my strategy. I passed the exam. I got a B, and I said, okay,
Kind of negotiation, right?
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. And
Exactly.
so
That's amazing.
what was
That's
fascinating
amazing.
though is my first corporate restructuring a assignment. It was a furniture company, and I show up to fix the company, and the CFO goes, "Don't you know?" And I go, "Don't I know what?" He goes, "This company's administratively insolvent." I thought like, oh, if I'd only gone to that class, I would know what that meant. But I never went to class. I didn't even know what that means. What does that mean? He goes, well, that means there's not even enough money to pay your salary. I go like, am you're kidding? He goes, no, that you're a professional and that's what it means. I go like, I'm thinking like, well, I'm not going to do this for free. And I remembered from the exam and debtors creditors, there's this thing called the bankruptcy code. So I went online, found the bankruptcy code, and I found this concept called augmentation, which
Mm,
means that if I have like a couch and a love seat, that I can go out and buy an end table and a lamp to make it so I can sell it as a ensemble, as a group. So I'll get more for each one of those than selling it individually. So I said, I read it. I said, okay, I know what it means, but then this is where the creativity comes in. I said,
mm,
I went out and hired a liquidator, and I said, you can bring in all your furniture, use all my stores for going out of business sale. I just want 10% off the top. He said, okay.
mm,
So I started with $15 million of furniture. Now, augmentation literally read means maybe I could be authorized to buy maybe a couple $100,000 of additional furniture to optimize the sale, but it wouldn't do anything because there were so many creditors that it wasn't going to change the outcome of the case. But what I did is I started with 15 million. So I would have liquidated that and distributed some money to different people. But
mm,
I had the largest going out of business sale in the history of the furniture industry. I
mm.
sold $250
I
million
heard about
dollars worth
it.
of furniture. And that was using creativity to take something. And then when the judge found out what I did, he said, wait a minute, that's not augmentation. And I said, well, Your Honor, you liked the outcome of the case, didn't you? He goes, oh, I love the outcome of the case. It was incredible. I've never seen anything like that. I said, well,
Yeah.
let's just agree it was within the purview of the meeting. He goes, okay. And then they ended up actually changing the definition of augmentation in the federal
Yeah.
statute based on my going out of business sales. So just,
New
yeah, so just,
strategy that you added, exactly. And that's
yeah,
that's amazing. And that shows us that resilient and just not give up and not only just do all the thing, even self-awareness in terms of going through the school, lawyer, being a lawyer, to not just being a lawyer, to add value to yourself,
right,
to when
exactly.
you are in a room, understand the old language. That's amazing. So
Yeah.
that's why you literally work in private equity and manage $1 billion and invest. So each time that you try to help businesses or do M&A, what exactly you look at, or how do you think uh, in terms of being ready to exit? If a
I,
business have this and this, you call it, okay, you are ready to go out.
Yeah, I think, to me, particularly in real estate investing, what I always look for is some unique quality to the product that I'm dealing with, that the end user is going to look at it and say, wow, this is
Now,
so cool
mm,
that I'm going to lease that or I'm going to buy that because it's so much better than everything else I see in the market. So, for example, we bought a building up in Silicon Valley that had an, an acre of excess land with the building, that I knew that I could develop an amenity with that excess land that none of the competitors in the entire Silicon Valley
no,
could compete with because they didn't have that much excess land.
never.
So what happened is the market tanked, obviously, in the last couple of years because of the economic uncertainty. So I was able to have a tenant come in, see what it looked like, and fall in love with it. And I explained to him, I said, listen, you see this exterior amenity? And he said, yeah. I said, this isn't just an exterior amenity. And he says, he looks at it, he goes, well, what do you mean? I said, this is a recruiting and retention tool for you, because to get the brightest and the best, you're going to have something that's really cool that nobody else has.
No,
So they're not going into this boring office building every day. And so he wanted to negotiate on the rent. And I said, no, it's not negotiable. I said, you go out and look around anywhere in Silicon Valley, you come back and show me another building that has this quality of an exterior amenity, and I'll negotiate on rent. Otherwise, this is the rent, take it or leave it. So like
no,
a week later, he said, okay, fine, I'll take it. I'll pay whatever you want. And so, and the only reason I was able to do that, which was over 30% higher than anybody else in the market, is because I had that amenity that no
already
direct,
planned for that.
yeah, nobody could
That's
compete
amazing.
against me because they didn't have that ability to develop
Being
it.
unique.
Exactly. Unique, something unique. So, whatever
Yes,
the business is you're in, you want to look at what your unique product offering is, and then protect that, and continue to always improve,
add value to that.
yeah, add value to your product offering. So that's
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of this. I
sure.
would like to talk about the book, Business is War. It is a global bestseller book.
Yeah.
JT and you introduced that amazing book into business world. I call it treasure map because I think each one, and especially some chapters like chapter 3 and chapter 8 that you wrote, it is amazing to use it as a roadmap, as a
Yeah.
blueprint.
Yeah.
You talk about 6 C's and you call it a war manual.
Hmm.
And also in chapter 3, there is so many mistakes. I myself, I couldn't pass chapter 3 for some weeks. I myself made almost all of that mistakes in business, and
Right.
that was amazing. How do you describe that war manual and how entrepreneurs can use it to change the situation and not just only survive, but also grow?
Yeah, I think the key there, Alan, is to look at the different elements of business. I mean, in chapter 3, there's all these different merchandising ideas, all these types of things. And I think what you do is two things. It helps you focus on what's important, but it also lets you know that you can succeed in anything. You just have to believe in yourself, and you have to be curious. And you have to be curious, creative, analytical. You have to do all those things. But most people fail because they either are scared to do it, or they run into some obstacles and they go like, oh, I'm never going to succeed, and so I'm just going to give up on this. And that's what the biggest thing for me is, having done this so many different times, and all, particularly in the corporate world, all in distress situations where everybody thought it was going to be a complete failure. So it was just believing that no, it's everything's fixable or curable. It's just
Everything,
focusing on the right drivers to turn the company into a successful.
not give up.
Exactly, and not give up. That's, and I'm very persistent in not giving up. And when there's a problem, I will find a solution. And by just being curious and asking a bunch of questions, the solution usually, well, not usually, always presents itself. And it's
Mm.
just that many
If you
people,
listen carefully.
yeah, many people just don't, they're not curious enough. They're just doing something and they're comfortable doing it, and they don't want to feel uncomfortable or pressured at all. And so everybody has the ability to do it. And I think a lot of the solutions on how to do it are in that book, Business is War, and that's why it's such a great book.
That's an amazing book, and it is a must read for every business owners and entrepreneurs. Thank you so much. What would you like to share with any business owners that they want to be ready for exit? And in terms of to be ready for exit, how do you think in terms of years they need to do what step exactly to make sure that they will have a successful exit?
I think the most important thing is they need to clean up their balance sheet and their P&L, and they need to be able to justify all the line items and eliminate waste. So when someone comes in to buy it, they're going to really focus in on the P&L and the balance sheet, and a lot of expenses really over.
Hidden one, especially.
Exactly. Oh, absolutely. And they have this whole thing called adjusted EBITDA versus actual EBITDA. So you'll get into a lot of people say, well, the EBITDA is adjusted, it's higher because I've been doing this, and this over the years. And, you as the new owner, you wouldn't do that. So you should use the higher adjusted EBITDA number as the multiple to pay me for my company. So you need to clean up your balance sheet and your P&L to make it look like a really well-run, legitimate company with good growth prospects and a very tight expense structure.
Exactly. Thank you so much for all insight that you share, all experience that you share. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Ellen. You have a great rest of your day. And